Well, a very good morning to everyone. I want to wish all the attendees a happy and most of all healthy 2021. You know, we all have a how we became involved in amateur radio story. And let me briefly tell you my story. It's 1961. I'm 14 years old, and it was a good day. Earlier in the day, I listened to the high CW signal from Oscar 1, the first amateur satellite. It's now 10:15 p.m. I'm in bed with my Philco portable radio pressed to my ear so my parents are not hearing me, and I'm tuned to WOR radio. And then out of the silence came this. Thank you for everybody. Well, that's a tribute to Gene Shepard. He was a great humorist on WOR from 10:15 to 11 with his stories of amateur radio. That's what inspired me to get my license in 1963. I got serious about amateur satellites in 2008 at a Radio Central Boiled Owls field day. How many of us, raise our hands, wish I could see you, actually got inspired at a field day? Well, as amateur operators, we're obligated to grow the amateur radio service. I was on the air this week promoting Ham Radio University, and one operator I spoke with said his 7-year-old daughter, Michaela, had some interest in getting her license. I said to her dad, I wanted to talk with her on the air. I asked Michaela a few questions, and I really encouraged her to get licensed. Now, it was her first time on the air. Will that inspire her? I don't know, but all of us have to try. We almost have an obligation if we're in the amateur radio service to do that. So let me ask you, how would you like to make contact using your HT with the International Space Station? Hey, how's that for a tickler? It's doable, and we're going to teach you how to do it today. We really will. Well, good morning. My name is Peter Portanova, Whiskey 2 Juliet Victor. I'd like to welcome everyone to Ham Radio University 2021. I will be your space guide, so buckle up your seatbelts and prepare for liftoff. To all our attendees from around the corner or around the world, this is our 22nd year spreading ham radio knowledge. I also want to thank and also very much appreciate the HRU committee. Tom Karuba, KA2D, this year's chairman, for all his efforts in managing our first virtual HRU. And I hope you're enjoying it. We had to learn a new video delivery platform, and a lot of you coming in as an attendees had to learn how to get in as well, and hopefully you aren't inconvenienced too much. I want to thank George, November 2 Golf Alpha, and Diane, N2DO, and Gary, KB2BSL, for all their time teaching all of us, all the panelists, how to have a smooth presentation. Thank you so very much. You know, virtual doesn't come cheap. We would like to ask you to consider a donation via PayPal by going to www, you know it, hamradiouniversity.org. Thank you so much. And if you're not a member of the American Radio Relay League, please consider joining. They are our advocates for protecting amateur radio spectrum, which is very wanted and valuable by other entities. And the ARRL is the voice to keep amateur radio on the air. Please visit www.arrl.org to join. I've included a summary of this presentation as a PDF. So if you missed something, not to worry, as well as a number of free downloaded satellite articles. Well, free, of course, everything's free here. Now, those downloaded articles are going to be available after the presentation. Not today, but in a few days, perhaps, we'll have them available to you. So not to worry, you'll be able to go to the hamradiouniversity.org site and download them. With respect to the time allotted, this will be an overview, just an overview, kind of a flyover of getting started on the amateur radio satellites. Hopefully the PDF handouts and my follow-up that you can have with me anytime for more deeper understanding if you'd like. You can reach me via W2JV, Whiskey 2 Juliet Victor at amsat.org. You're probably saying, what is AMSAT? Well, we'll tell you. Not going to keep any secrets today. I'm also available to do a more detailed satellite forum. So contact your club and I'll make myself available. That's for sure, no doubt about that. All righty, enough on this slide, and you see the information, and that's what's happening. Well, the title is The Art of Operating Amateur Satellites with an HT. So hopefully you're in the right room. Okay, let's begin getting our wings and getting into space without getting airsick. And what we try to do is, you're right, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Why am I adding the word art to describe this presentation? Art's a funny word to use here. Well, I remember reading the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance and Zen in the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, a true title. Well, every time you point your antenna to the sky to capture an amateur radio satellite, you are combining art and science. Trust me, you'll say that when you have a few passes under your belt. What's the art? Well, the art part is using your creativity to make contacts with other amateurs. I can only tell you, after thousands and thousands of contacts, there is still a thrill for me to exchange my call and grid, pointing my antenna at a spinning 4 by 4 by 4 inch CubeSat. Here it is here. This is a demonstration of the CubeSat. This is a little kit that was available to us that we built. This is it. This is all it is. No, this is not the engineering model. Just imagine this spinning in space. The antennas are both on the right and left sides, UHF and VHF antennas, and they're spinning and spinning. So we're going to learn how to really contact and correct that. So what does it weigh? About 3 pounds. It's about 400 miles above the Earth, hurtling through space at 17,000 miles an hour. And you're trying to chase this thing. As a kid growing up in the Mercury and Apollo space age, oh man, let me tell you, folks, this never, ever, ever gets old. It really doesn't, ever. And there's the radio I started with, my FT60, and there's the VHF and UHF channels, and there's a satellite. It's a Fox series satellite right there. Okay, well, we all know, we've heard it a number of times if we've been on a number of forums. We've seen it displayed on our website. And as you read, we're dedicating Ham Radio University 2021 to our founder, N2MUN. I could hear it in my ears, November 2, Mike Uniform November, with his Long Island twang. It's Phil Lewis. Phil was one of my closest and dearest friends. He took me from technician to extra in no time. Phil had a gift, a real gift for making complicated material easy. And he had a tremendous smile, always available, always happy. And he deserved all the credits that he got. He was a very, very special person. He'll always be remembered. No doubt about it. Okay, what are we doing now? Let's see here. We're doing a poll. Okay. George, thank you so much for launching the poll. We'll wait to see the answers. And the question is, what class of license do you have? Technician, general, extra, or not licensed yet? Okay, there is it. There is the poll. Questions? Thank you, George, for putting that together. I do have a clock, but I'm not going to do the clock. Anyway, Adele, how am I doing? All right, I got a thumbs up. That's my producer over there, Adele. She has my license now, WB2OQQ. That's what I was born with in 1963. Actually, it's WN2OQQ. All right, George, you're sharing the poll results. I can't see it on the screen, but maybe I can make the screen light. Adele, can you see that? Yeah, Adele can see that. What's the percentages?
Peter, if you want.
Yes, please do that, George.
Okay, we got 2% that are unlicensed, 15% novice or tech, 25% general, 5% advanced, 53% extras.
Excellent, fantastic. Thank you very much. What percentage of people, George, did the poll?
84%.
Attaway, we're paying attention. Thanks, folks. I appreciate that. Well, we want to keep amateur radio in space, don't we? Well, it's not easy. It's not easy keeping amateur radio in space. There's my AMSAT banner back there. You see that? I'm very proud as an AMSAT ambassador to take that all around. Well, what does AMSAT stand for? I'm not going to ask you the quiz, but it's the Radio Amateur Satellite Corporation. It was founded in 1969, currently an all-volunteer organization. It was founded to continue the work of Project Oscar that began in 1958, which built and got a launch for Oscar 1. You know, the Radio Amateur Satellite Corporation, as AMSAT is officially known, is a scientific and educational nonprofit corporation. They design, construct, test, and operate space stations in the amateur radio service. I want to briefly acknowledge AMSAT's long-serving office manager, Martha Saragovitz. I apologize, Martha, if I didn't pronounce your name right, because I always called you Martha. She's pictured on the right there, you know, with her gorgeous, beautiful dog, Spencer. She retired. She retired after so many years in the service. Her value was incalculable. When I served on the board, She always was very helpful to guide me through as a novice. She was AMSAT's only employee. Well, you know, getting into space is not cheap. AMSAT does not receive any funding from the government. We depend on support from our members to keep amateur radio in space. I sound like Channel 13, but space is expensive. How does AMSAT, with only contributions and membership revenue, get a ride into space? Well, through the educational launch of nanosatellites, ALANA, which is an exciting initiative created by NASA to attract and retain students in the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics disciplines. That's STEM. Students at all levels add their experiments to our CubeSat that AMSAT will build and ground stations monitor, and NASA I sound like a Long Islander, NASA arranges for a launch. A free ride to space is just one step in the process. However, all the expenses of building and testing the satellite consumes a great deal of resources. That's money. Whether it's a sizable donation or just joining, we appreciate every effort you make for us. Amazon Smile is another income stream for AMSAT. It costs you nothing as an Amazon member. You can designate AMSAT as the charity of your choice. After you spend, you will receive Amazon Smile points. There they are. And this year, Amazon received, or AMSAT rather, received almost $7,000 from Amazon. Thank you very much for all those who did contribute to that. Well, we're ready to launch. We're ready really to get serious. You're saying, when is the space stuff? When am I going to get into space? Hurry, hurry. Okay, we're going to do that. But first, before we do that,
3, 2, 1.
Whoa. Okay, take it easy. All right. That is, I think, a successful launch. Along with that, we're also going to have, George, another poll, George. Thank you. Amateur radio satellite experience. We're going to ask that question.
Okay, hang on one sec.
I'm going to hang on. I can have a little sip of tea here, as Frank Sinatra would say. Trust me, it's only tea. All right. Survey says poll is up.
50% have voted.
There we go, 50%. Okay, come on, let's get that number over 84. Come on, move that dial.
All right, we'll leave it for another 5 seconds here. We got 82%.
Oh, there you go, 82. Thank you.
Okay, last second to vote. All right, I'm closing the poll.
Thank you. So what's the predominant number there, George? One contact, many, none at all.
62% have never done it.
Wow, that is, hey folks, 62. We're going to have some new satellite operators tomorrow. 62%. Great, fantastic. Thank you, George, very, very much. All right, you know, before we start off, there's been a lot of, when we started out, a lot of myths. There's a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of information that is propagated that's not true about satellites. And what is that all about? There you go, Mythbusters. That was a good show. One of the myths is this, that a big station is required. By the way, this is a really big station, not even VHF, UHF. That's a Collins radio, beautiful radio. That's the, that's not the 75S3. I'm not sure which one that is, but big station. No, we often think because we're making contacts in outer space, the equipment required is expensive. No, we don't need big radios. We don't need big antennas. We don't need big power. We just need what? Yeah, big imagination. That's what we need. In fact, you probably have, honestly, the most expensive equipment already, the HT, the dual band HT, VHF, UHF, HT. I'm sure you've got it. There's probably dust on it. It's probably only used for your club's weekly nets. Hey, we can do better than that. Come on, let's get into space, really. All right, so what do we need? What do we need to get into space? Well, here's what we need. We need a technician license. That's easy, easy peasy, technician license. We need past prediction information over here. We got to know when the satellite is over us. A Yagi antenna. There's my Yagi antenna at Jones Beach. Got some nice gain to it. We need a compass to track where the satellite is in our footprint. A recorder to record those stations because your hands are kind of busy. You don't have 4 hands. A watch set to UTC. That's important. By the way, this is a Bruton, B-R-U-T-O-N compass. Nice compass. Very inexpensive through Amazon. There's the watch set to UTC or your certainly smartphone, really. A dual band, there's the dual band UHF, split frequencies, there's the UHF and VHF, really. What's most important? Location, location, location. You really need a good location if you really want to make contact with the satellites. Yes, it could be compromised, but the better location is, the better you're able to talk with the satellites, and we'll talk about that. But most important, don't throw up those past predictions. Don't throw them up in the air. Come on now, you got to have patience. Be cool. It's going to be okay. No problem. So there you go. That's easy. That's all you need. All you need. No big deal at all. Most of you have that, really. Well, let's go through our progression. We can begin our satellite experience with 1 HT. Now, 2 is always preferred. It really is. But we'll let you get away with just 1. If we become serious about the satellites, we want to move as soon as we can to 2 radios. It's important during a busy pass to be able to know that you're getting into the repeater. It's referred to as duplex operations, allowing you to hear your signal on the receive side of the 2 radios. That way, you know that everything was set correctly and your antenna is positioned to the spin of the satellite. I'll cover spin and polarization later. With 1 radio, you're only guessing. And now the etiquette with 1 radio is when you're using 1 HT, use the satellite on off hours if you can. I listed a few examples of some HTs in the download section I've included. It's an Excel file of the many choices of radios that work with satellites. And I want to thank Mr. Stufford, Pat, for that. He really was able to put together some nice information. Well, now we now have our radio. Most of us have the radio. What's the most important piece of equipment? Yeah, a good sound body and mind. I know that's true, but gain. Just like location. The most important piece of equipment when trying to receive or transmit to weak signals is the antenna. You know, we need gain for the satellite to hear us. We can't push a lot of power to the satellite to make up for the lack of gain. Otherwise, we can attenuate the passband for everyone, and the satellite stops hearing. No, you don't want that. No, you don't want that, because a gang of angry satellite operators will be knocking on your door. Don't want that. So an elk or an arrow, as an example, is a good investment. You know, they can also be used as an antenna in your Go box for emergency communications, EMCOM, or through ARES and RACES. And that's good, especially if you're in the UHF, VHF applications. Or for very little, and this is exciting, you can build this tape measure Yagi antenna. There it is, km4lgm.com. Don't worry, I have a PDF you're going to get with all this information. A very nice antenna to build for very, very, very little money. Okay, now we're getting close. We're getting close. We need to understand a few terms. The first term is, and it's less than you think. It takes a rocket scientist, remember, to design a CubeSat, but an amateur to operate them. Always remember that. Amateur can operate them. Okay, Oscar and orbit. What is Oscar? Well, some people will say that's one of your cats. Well, that's true. That is true. Oscar has a little tip on his tail. It looks like an antenna. But what Oscar is, it's an orbiting satellite carrying amateur radio, OSCAR. And that's what Oscar is, orbiting satellite carrying amateur radios. Anytime we have an orbiting satellite, every amateur satellite that is orbiting carries the O designation. Very proud of that. It's now in orbit. AO92 represents A for AMSAT that launched it, and O for Oscar, AO. If a country launches a satellite like Saudi Arabia, their satellite will be called SO, Saudi Oscar-50. Okay, enough of that. Orbit. Oh man, look at this. Every time I see HEO MEO, I get excited. Our satellites are in a LEO orbit, right hugging the Earth. A LEO orbit is a low Earth orbit around 160 to 1,600 kilometers. That's where most our FM satellites live, above the Earth. Now, SO50, for example, completes a sun synchronous orbit in about 90 minutes. So we can see the possibilities in larger footprint orbits. On the slide, look at the size of these footprints. Look at this orbit here. This is a GEO orbit, 23,000 kilometers here, 24 hours a day for this. A MEO orbit, 2,000 kilometers, you know, compared to 160 to 1,600 kilometers. The ISS is at 408 kilometers. We built a satellite, a phase 3D satellite, AO40. Then unfortunately, a cap was left on the satellite. There was an explosion. That was in 2000. That was at 60,000 kilometers. Man, that is exciting, let me tell you. So our goal, our being AMSAT, is to get into medium Earth orbit at about 2,000 kilometers. That'll be AMSAT's near-term goal with the Golf series of CubeSats, and we'll talk about that. By the way, QO-100, that's up here somewhere. It's up out here, QO-100. It's 25 degrees east. Now, that means we're not going to be able, because 25 degrees east is Brazil to Thailand. So that's a satellite built by the Kotari Nation. It's at 23,000 kilometers, built by Japan's Mitsubishi Electric. Its main purpose is to provide direct-to-home TV to the Middle East and North Africa. The amateur radio transponder is a secondary purpose for it. And again, you receive from Brazil to Thailand. Wow, that's exciting. So maybe someday, maybe we'll be able to get a ride on one of these geo orbits, because right now it's impossible to afford. It's out of the question, and NASA is not going to give us a ride to a geo orbit or a MEO orbit for that matter. Footprint. Okay, well, a footprint is when our antenna can hear the satellite, and we can then begin to pick up signals. Does that mean when the satellite starts in our footprint at 2 degrees, we can hear and transmit to it? No, not usually, unless we're on a hill with no obstructions. We'll normally begin to hear the satellite when it rises above our obstructions, whether they're trees, whether they're buildings, as an example. So that's another term. Very something to, there's the footprint, and that's the satellite's footprint. Now, the higher we are, of course, in a MEO orbit, that footprint is going to cover the entire United States and part of Europe. And that's exciting, and that's what that's about. So the higher you are, the larger your footprint, and it will as well go into Brazil as well. So with our, basically, we have now to learn about uplink and downlink. Now, sounds complicated, but it isn't really. Unlike a terrestrial repeater that has input and output frequencies, a space repeater requires 2 bands. So with our HT, we send the signal up VHF, and the satellite retransmits it down in UHF. For this particular example, it can swap back and forth. You got to watch what the frequency is, allowing the ability to hear the signal to confirm acquisition on the downlink. Now, we transmit up to the satellite. What's it called? That's right, the uplink frequency. And we hear stations from the satellite on the right, downlink frequency. So if we only program the satellite frequencies here, 145.850 uplink, 430.6795 downlink, with a 67 PL, which should be around here somewhere. There it is, right there, 67 PL. We would hear most of the satellite pass. So I'll cover programming your satellite just in a few slides. We'll get into that. Okay, we're getting close to some of the last terms we have to go. All right, UTC, AOS, and LOS. Okay, what's AOS? AOS, on this slide, you can see the approximate time of AOS. That's the blue arrow. Now, it's only a prediction, just like the weather. You know how that goes. When we start to hear call signs, that's the real AOS for us. So the satellite at AOS is level with the horizon. As I said in an earlier slide, if you were at a location where you had unobstructed views of the horizon, you might be able to talk through it to another ham, but most of us don't have that luxury. We then wait until the signals we hear are very strong or stronger, and then we transmit. So I'll cover the process in more detail in later slides, not too much later, believe me. So what is LOS, loss of signal? That's the red arrow. That's when we no longer hear any activity. We also see 2 green arrows. Those arrows, they're very important because they represent the path that the satellite will cover in your footprint. Now, we'll want to make sure we follow that path with our antenna. Big reason why a lot of people fail in the past, because they don't pay attention to that. We'll get into that. UTC, Continental Universal Time. All the past predictions are in UTC. So make sure you watch your phone is set to UTC. Okay, don't get scared by this Doppler effect. Oh, what we're going to have to do some slide rule stuff? Maybe 15 years ago. But due to the high orbital speed, remember 17,000 miles an hour of the amateur satellite, the uplink and downlink frequencies will vary during the course of the satellite pass. Now, this phenomenon is simply known as a Doppler effect. So while the satellite, while it's moving towards the ground station, the downlink frequency will appear, not actual, to be higher than normal. Now, the Doppler shift is more apparent at the higher frequencies. Now, look at this, 70 centimeters, the blue arrow, look what we're looking at, a 9.76, almost 10 kilohertz difference in the particular frequency versus 2 meters at only 3.27. So as you can see on the slide, the higher you go, it becomes difficult. So the one true rule, never fails in Doppler tuning, is always adjust the higher frequency. We'll explain that programming your radio later. Not going to have to worry about it. What's the last thing we need to know? Polarity. Now that's not so bad, polarity. That spin cycle that the satellite is in, as it orbits, its polarization as it relates to the Earth is always changing. So the result is a tumbling effect. So you can imagine we've got our antennas here. It is just tumbling and tumbling and tumbling. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means the antenna is going to be pointed in all different directions, not always pointed to Earth. So because of this rotation, turning the antenna keeps the satellite signal within your radio. So the Fox series of satellites have the technology to minimize spin and using devices to keep the antenna pointed more towards Earth. SO50, as an example, does not have that technology. Now let's see here. You may not see this too well, but this is a slide. Watch him twisting. Watch the difference. There, no signal there at all. Twisting, strong signal. No signal right here, strong signal. Listen how strong the signal is. No signal, it disappears. Disappears back, like 15 dB. There you go. That's pretty effective. And thank you very much. That's Drew Glassberner, KO4MA. Thank you for that example. And he has a very strong wrist, very strong. He met, like so, not too many others, contacted all our grid squares. That's a goal, 488 grid squares, excuse me, in the continental United States. Okay, so that's it. A little sip of tea. Okay, what's the next thing we have to do? Well, we have to plan and we have to prepare. Plan and prepare for a successful pass. By the way, you see that handle? That's from my father, may he rest in peace. That's from his saw handle that I put on the particular antenna. Thanks for Clint Bradford. He suggested that. We'll talk more about him later. So working in an amateur satellite involves a few steps. You know, at first it may seem complicated, but after a few passes, it'll become more routine, believe me. However, we're always in a lessons learned learning mode. You know, how can I do better on the next pass? Or let me email that operator, K8YSE. John's going to know because he's a phenomenal operator. He made 4 contacts on that pass. I didn't make any at all. What did you do, John? How did it work? So that's really important. Well, time for a little tea. You know why? Because it's time now. George, you're up to bat. I believe this is our last survey. Are we ready? Here we go. Thank you, George. George is great, isn't he? George deserves a raise. So the question is, do you own a dual band HT for UHF VHF? I've got a few to sell. No, I'm only kidding. Okay, George, how's it coming in?
Right, 84% are voted, so just give it another 5 seconds and we'll close the poll.
All righty, 5 seconds and we're going to close the poll. Okay. There we go. I like that. I just had to do that again. I'm sorry. Just like that horn.
All right, Peter, can you see the results?
Let my assistant, can you see the results? What's the percentage?
Yes, 89.
89%. Oh, we have 89% of people that have a HT, and I believe the number was something like 69% that never operated satellites. Oh man, we've got magic. It's going to happen. Thank you, George, very, very much. Hey, that's exciting. I felt like I get a Christmas present. Okay, here we go. Now we got to pick a satellite. Now we got to get to work. Okay, here are all the satellites. Okay, these are the FM satellites up here that you can work with your FM HT. These are the satellites you could work when you have a dual band, all mode receiver, transmitter, transceiver. We'll get into that. Okay, so that's a list of the available amateur satellites. Since we have an HT that's capable of FM only, that's no problem. Don't mean as an insult. It's a good starting spot. We have one. We can only use the FM satellites. Now, I highlighted AO 91 and 92 up here. Now, their batteries are not fully charging. Yeah, I hear the frowns. We're nearing the end of life for them. So when the satellite is operating, only operate in daylight. If everyone follows this, we can extend the life of these satellites. You're going to see by one of our lists that right now they are in safe mode because they're not even close to being available. But putting them in safe mode, getting the batteries up to speed should work. So Let me just point the future, just a little bit of the future here for a moment, okay? If we all move, all 66, 69% of us, to an all band, all mode radio, we can now extend our operating to the sideband, CW, and digital satellites. Now we can see the limitations in using the FM satellites. Don't let me discourage you, but there's some limitations. One channel, like a terrestrial repeater, it can get crowded and difficult to get in. The stations, and there are a few there with the better antennas, more power, big voice, and a good horizon will always win out. You know, call it the FM satellite lottery. However, if you have an all band, all mode transceiver like the IC910, which I have, or two FT817s, you now have up to 100 kilohertz of band to work with. That's pretty good. And you have more opportunities to work other countries as well. So let's talk about these FM satellites. Of them, in my opinion, in my experiences, what are the easy sats? Well, and it's always subject to change. So the ISS crossband repeater, or PO-101, they might be the easiest to work, with SO50 being the most challenging. Now, these tests were taken at my location, which is surrounded by large trees, limiting a good view of the horizon. So if you're in an open field, you'll experience better results. And certainly with portable activities, you can pick your spot. Okay, now, what's the first thing we're going to do? Satellite status. You know, before we choose an FM satellite to work, we want to make sure that reports indicate, survey says, that it's functioning. Okay, now the ISS, you know, it's in a blue condition. That's good. And those numbers down there, and this was taken, by the way, yesterday, January 8th, all these blue numbers are all reporting stations. So that's, the more blue, the better. So we like that. We can go on to the next step. But before I leave, AO91, look at it. It's in a red condition, some telemetry, and yellow is a telemetry being sent, but mostly red, not functioning. SO50, oh, it's happy. It's in the blue zone. You can work that. AO92, we talked about before, AO92, 95. Look at 92, all in the red, all in safe mode, not currently operating. Does it mean, folks, that it's not going to be in the blue zone in the near future? No, it might be. That's why you have to look every day. And this you find at the AMSAT website. I'll show you how. The satellite status, AOA, so 92, 90. Now 95 is, you can copy telemetry. That's exciting. That's a whole nother bunch of slides, but you have the capability to be able to copy telemetry, and that's what the yellow means. So even though it's not operating voice, it is sending its overall health, and it's pretty exciting. And it's very important for us in ground stations to report that, because they collect that information from all different points of the Earth, and they kind of get an idea what the satellite is doing, and so they can anticipate it. There's PO-101, by the way, the other easy sat, and that's also in a blue condition. Okay, now we've got our radio in our hand, our palms are a little sweaty, and now we're adjusting for Doppler. Slide rules, not necessary. So take a look at the chart. You know, we can always use these frequencies on each pass. Now, there they are. There's our channels that were programmed. We're calling it the ISS crossband repeater. Now watch, the transmit frequency, lower frequency, always stays the same. What's the Doppler rule, true Doppler? The higher frequency we change. So there it is. There's our CTCSS. You got to put that in, otherwise you're not going to get through the uplink. There's the receive frequencies. This is the at AOS. This is at time of closest arrival, and this is LOS. So, you know, how do we know when to change the frequency on the chart? Well, when we begin to lose the signal after we adjust our antenna, and I'll show that on another slide how that works. Okay, so we're choosing the ISS. It's an orbiting satellite about 254 miles up. It recently received a brand new set of radios, and it's got a strong, stable signal. A true definition of an easy sat. Okay, so now we got to start doing some searching. Okay, AMSAT website, satellite information. Okay, so we don't require any tracking programs or expensive software. We just need the AMSAT site to get all the information we need. It's free. Okay, so we now drop down. The next thing we'll find is we choose the satellite. Add the blue arrow. Point on that. That's the ISS. Our grid square, got to put that in. Got to know your grid square, the orange arrow. Hit calculate, the yellow arrow, and then you finally hit the red arrow. And like magic, woof, we have to do no predictions, don't need a lot of books. We now can see the passes. So what's our next slide going to look like? There you go. Bingo. Let's find a good pass here. This is what we're getting for the ISS. We only want passes that will give us our best chance of making contacts. The green arrow with an elevation of 50 degrees would be a good choice. This is our pass. It begins at 0346 UTC, as you can see, or 10:46 p.m. It'll be in our footprint for 10 minutes, 44 seconds. Its AOS will begin at 245 degrees, blue arrow, and the satellite will be at LOS at 51 degrees, red arrow. We need to pick some landmarks from 245 to 51 degrees. That's the path it'll travel. You need to approximately adjust your elevation on your antenna to match the height approximately over the horizon as it travels in our footprint. Okay, so now we go through our checklist. First, let's go. No different than a pilot pre-flight. No matter how many flying hours, they always prepare a list. Follow this and you'll always get off the ground successfully. Believe you me. Okay, what does this mean? Okay, number one, as we said, go to ansat.org. Number two, we then be early, because I've been late too many times. Show predictions for the ISS, 30 degrees minimum, Doppler shift, program that in. Squelch open, very important. We're used to, on our terrestrial repeaters, not to have the squelch open. You got to open the squelch because we get weak signals. Watch set to UTC, compass, or the phone to trace the different landmarks as it travels the path, and that's it. So we're being careful. There's the UHF, VHF setting. There's the compass. We've got the phone, and now we're going to make some contacts. Okay, so we're making some contacts right now. Let's make sure we're following satellite etiquette. Now, I've included the best practices PDF, which will be an important read. Now, you can see I titled this presentation, The Art. You know, it takes art sometimes over science, you know, to make a contact. So make sure you can hear other stations. Don't just start shouting. Try not to call too early in the footprint. Wait for a pause in the activity. Adjust the antenna for the best signal. The wrist, like you saw Drew do. Give your call sign once and listen. Know your grid square, or call a specific station. Do not call CQ. You're going to see someone do that, but we'll forgive them. Repeat the process as the satellite moves. You can schedule a contact with another. That's powerful. Call someone that you see on the bulletin board that's made a number of contacts. Ask them, hey, could you listen for me and contact me? Okay, let's now, here I am in my previous location, and this is Massapequa, pretty flat horizon to the horizon. Now, the audio basically isn't important. Just watch the way I match the antenna to the signal. The satellite's tumbling in space. We're matching the polarization as it spins. Notice when I move to another preset to hear other stations. Okay, here we go. Okay, now you see me moving the antenna? Look at the signal is getting stronger now. Sorry about the wind. There I go. Moving it. There he goes. There he is. Look at it go. Look at it drop.
John, Merry Christmas to you.
I'm in. The elevation, by the way, now is about 50 degrees here. You can see where the antenna is pointed. There you go, Kilo Baker Henry. My apologies, I didn't give the full call. Look how strong I am. I'm pretty stable now. Losing it. I'm twisting my wrist, not crazy. Now I'm changing frequency. See what my hand is? There you go. Look how much stronger I came in. There you go, and I'm making contact. There you go again. Isn't that is so exciting? I can't tell you. Look how strong that is. It's holding the frequency pretty well. There you go. Well, there it is. I'll tell you something. As they say, it doesn't get better than that. It really doesn't. Okay, let's talk about what went wrong, really. It happens to all of us. Remember, practice, practice, practice will improve our results. In the space business, or really any important activity, we do a lessons learned review. When I'm having difficulty making contact with a satellite, I review what I did. Most often it comes down to operator error or a lack of understanding of the satellite's, characteristics or faults. If I can't correct the problem, I'll go to the bulletin board and ask the community what they're doing right, and most often they have a solution. I've created a list of about 10 go-to people, my lifeline, when I'm having a problem. These operators are on every day, and they know if the satellite frequency has changed or some other parameter or anomaly has occurred. So what went wrong? Okay, a number of things. Satellite pass too low, too much activity, obstructions, the PL isn't set, the squelch is closed, not on the correct path of the satellite, not adjusting for left-hand, right-hand polarization of wrist, not tuning fast enough, The Doppler shift is catching you. You're not doing it fast enough. Your watch is not synchronized. The uplink, downlink isn't correct. You're not on the correct frequencies. It's happened to all of us, me too. And most importantly, the most difficult part is the neighbor. Don't point that thing at me. And that can really throw you out. All righty. Thanks a lot for that. Very briefly, amateur radio activities on the ARIS, amateur radio on the International Space Station. We have a VHF, UHF, crossband repeater, a VHF digipeater, an SSTV, and most importantly, school contacts on 145-800 to advance STEM initiatives. I mean, you can see on a clear night with your eyes, pick a path with an elevation 50 degrees above the horizon. Use AMSAT sight, or any tracking software to find AOS and elevation. How about making a contact with a crossband repeater while you're outside watching the ISS pass over your head? Real exciting stuff. Okay, if you want satellite tracking software, if you don't want to write down the past details from the AMSAT site or you're away from home, satellite programs could really help. Really gives you a real good idea. I want to highlight some terrific satellite software called SAT, Self-Contained Antenna Tracker. It's a program developed by a member of the Great South Bay Amateur Radio Club, Keith Bush, AC2MI. It is a program designed for a base station with the need to control the antenna elevation and azimuth during a pass. I tested the software. The setup is easy. The support is phenomenal, second to none, and it runs easily on your browser. It has a very informative interface. So I really like it a lot. Satellite resources, well, AMSAT.org. We use multiple slides. I could show so many resources. They're out all over the place. But basically, in my experience, using the AMSAT website and subscribing to the bulletin board would be a good starting point. I'd like to give a big shout out to K6, Kilo 6, Lima, Charlie, Sierra, Clint Bradford. He has accumulated a trove of treasured information on satellite operating. He's one of the most knowledgeable and entertaining satellite operators in the world. His site is a must visit. He also does Zoom presentations that are very, very entertaining. They really are. So please stop by his website. Future launches, there's always something going on at AMSAT. Fox 1 will give us another FM satellite to use. This is the last satellite, in the Fox class, and it should be launched within the first quarter here. Our next project is to prepare for higher orbit and use basically the Golf series at a LEO orbit to test the technology to get to a MEO orbit. That means with a higher footprint, higher orbit, we get a larger footprint and can work other countries in a MEO orbit. And then the holy grail, of course, the HEO orbit, to have a satellite available for hours at a time with a footprint that covers a large chunk of the world. Well, the footprint and future looks as high as our imagination and our funds can take us. As the song goes, the best is yet to come. It really, really is. Thank you, everybody, so very much. I hope I have a few minutes for questions. We'll open that up. George, if there's some questions, I'm ready. Thanks a lot, everybody, and we'll talk, I hope, often.
Okay, yes. Hi, Peter. You do have some questions. Let's see. What do we have here? What is the spin rate of the rotating satellites?
Good question. The spin rate, it's actually it's something that is calculated and something that changes on every single pass. We now, on the more modern Fox series satellites, we have a device to be able to control that spin, to minimize it. The number, I don't know the exact number. You can go to the AMSAT website and pick a couple of telemetry pieces of information and find that out. But I can tell you that even with magnetometers pointing to Earth, that spin rate is something that we really have to look at very often, and there's some controlling that we can do to that. Hey, thanks for that question.
Okay, Peter, next question. Do I need a directional antenna to make contacts with the ISS?
Well, yes, you do. You can use a longer antenna, an extended whip antenna, but you're lacking gain with that. So with a Yagi antenna like the ones I discussed, the Arrow, the Elk, or the antenna made from the tape measure antenna, you do need directional, important, because it does travel, as we saw, from 52 to 345 degrees. So direction pointing to it is important. You can try it if you have a great location, but remember now, when you're using an extended whip antenna, you're not pointing it straight up like a terrestrial repeater. You have to match the pass. So if it's basically, if it's laying flat, you're starting it here and you're rotating it up. Most likely, the only success you'll have there is receiving it that way, but not being able to transmit to it because you're lacking the gain. Thank you.
Okay, we have a couple more, but we only have about another minute. Are the
Okay.
uplink and downlink antennas on the satellite in the same orientation? On a cross-polarized antenna like the arrow, do I need to turn the wrist 90 degrees between transmit and receive?
Yes, you do. The antennas are mounted on either side of the satellite, left and right of the satellite. So yes, as it's spinning, as it's going through the tumbling effect, you need to constantly adjust it by moving it left and right. Not too significantly, but certainly you have to be able to stay in the satellite's path.
Okay, you mentioned two radios. Do you need two when you have a full duplex radio, such as a Wuxcon KG UV8DHT?
The problem is desense, and that's the problem with many radios. And in that Excel that I'm sending you, you'll find that there are some radios that are more sensitive to desense than others. Big problem, a lot of folks use a diplexer to eliminate the desense, and some radios are better at it, but most radios can't really do a very good job. The Kenwood radio, but that's a $400 radio, which is now discontinued. I wonder why, is very good at that, but most radios do have a desense problem with that.
Okay, we can take maybe one more. If anybody has other specific questions, you can email Peter, and he'll give you his contact info again. What do you say on the radio when the satellite passes, to keep it brief?
Basically, you're exchanging your call sign and your grid square. That's it. It's very much like a contest type situation, not signal reports at all. Again, because so many people want to get into the satellite, we want to give everybody a chance. So basically, it's Whiskey 2 Juliet Victor FN30, and that's it.
Okay, if you want to wrap up, Peter, we'll close the webinar.
Thank you so very much. Yes, thank you, folks. There's my contact information. I want to thank everyone for attending our first virtual satellite talk. We hope you found it entertaining and educational. Again, thanks to the HRU committee for this event. And as Snoopy says, keep looking up. That's the secret of life. I hope to hear all of you on the satellite someday soon. 73s, be safe. And Phil, N2MUN, this is dedicated to you. This is Whiskey 2 Juliet Victor signing out. Enjoy the rest of HRU. It's a great event. Thank you, George.